So yeah, so back to the weightlifting. I noticed I noticed that do you still work out at a gym or do you have your own workout room at your house?
Yeah, well, what happened with that was I was in this gym. It was like a commercial gym, and I just happened to work out at the same time when the owner would come in. And he came in and he sees me loading up the bar with, 4 plates on each side and doing deadlifts. And he's like, hey, I don't want you dropping the weights like that in here. And I had it on video. So I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing these weights down any heavier than anybody else's. Look, and I'm trying to show him the video. And he's like, look, the thing is, women in particular don't want to be coming in here and working out around men throwing around heavy weights. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
And
that's weird.
I was like, well, look, I think I'm going to have to train somewhere else. And I looked at some of the powerlifting gyms in my area, and they were a little bit more expensive. You got a lot more coaching, which probably would have been a good idea for me. But like I said, I'm on a very regimented schedule where I have to fit everything into specific time slots through the day. So a lot of them you had to be there at a specific time to train, and that for my lifestyle at this moment in time, that even though that would have been better for me in terms of as an athlete, that wasn't really an option. So I just went out and looked on Craigslist. I found some weights, found a bar. I went to a second time around or Played Again Sports, which is in my area, and you can get used equipment from them
Yeah,
for fairly cheap.
yeah.
I bought some stuff from them and just kind of made my own home gym for about $300. I had a bench, a barbell, a squat rack, and squat stands.
Well,
And
there's
one,
two things I saw that I really like about your setup. And maybe you can tell me what they are. I guess the weightlifters would know them, but when you're squatting, you appear to have this kind of safety rack when
yeah,
you get down low that you could conceivably set the bar on if you had to.
and I have, yeah.
Okay. Now, what's that called? Is that called a squat rack or is that a safety? What's it called?
Well, usually a squat rack will have those built into it.
Okay.
Since I just bought squat stands, I needed something. So a guy I knew that was a welder had fabricated those and just called them safety spotters. And
Those are awesome.
they were like $10. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
And then you have a similar thing with the bench. Like you come down and do a bench press, and you got these things on
it's
the.
the
Is
same.
that the same one? Okay, that's beautiful. So you're not going to drop a huge bar on yourself. That's, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, usually if I get stuck anywhere, it's at the bottom of the squat, so I can just let go of it and it falls, a little bit, an inch or so onto the
Yeah.
stands. And if I come down on the bench press, I squat or I bench to right there. If I get stuck, which I have as well,
Yeah.
then if I go down, it's still sitting on my chest. So I actually have to roll the bar. Once it gets to about right here, those spotters catch it, and I
Okay.
put it out there pretty quickly because even though they're sturdy and holding the weight, the idea of having that weight over top of my neck is not real comfortable. So I get out there, but
Yeah, but at
all
least
that I miss a lift like that.
well, I've seen some of these photographs of guys just going crazy, and fall without a system like you've got. You really shouldn't be lifting alone, So
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, that's a great system that you've got. And the other thing I was curious about your experience with is the effects of diet on your performance. So I guess it sounds like early on maybe you did some fluctuation with fat percentage in your diet, and maybe you reached a happy conclusion about what was best for you. Have you noticed any effects of, let's say, temporary dietary changes on your performance? In other words, like, let's say a couple of days you didn't get enough water. Can you feel that in your workout? Or a couple of days, let's say you only got 2,500 calories for a couple of days. Can you feel that in the amount of energy you have and that sort of thing?
In the short term, no, not really.
Okay.
If I do that for a elongated period of time, say a week or 2 weeks, then yeah, I start maybe not even a week, but at 2 weeks or so, yeah, I start to feel I don't necessarily start to lose a great deal of strength, but I don't progress at all like I had been
Yeah.
previously. My caloric intake is too low. I can decrease my caloric intake by 200-300 calories or so every day for an extended period of time, and probably still continue to make progress. That's below my normal intake.
Right.
So that's why I usually, when people ask, I usually say, well, decrease your caloric intake by a little bit, or increase it by a little bit.
That's if they're having weight loss issues, you mean?
Yeah, or if they want to gain weight. So I'm kind of more into making subtle changes, rather
Okay.
than saying, well, I'm on 4,000 calories a day now, and I want to lose some weight, so I'm going to go down to 3,000. I think that's too big of a jump,
Yeah.
and not necessary, and I'm probably going to suffer more strength and muscle losses that way.
Got you. Now, you kind of have gone into an area I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, which is some people say that there's not a lot of truth to this notion that there's a calories in, calories out mathematical equation in terms of fat. Uh, so what's your take on that? I mean, do you think that if somebody eats 10,000 calories a day, that they're likely to gain weight, whether it's carbs or fat or protein?
Well, I'll tell you what I know to be true from like biochemistry and things like that, and I'll just tell you there's a lot of things I don't know.
Okay.
And that is that uh, for an active person, um, which I mean, this is kind of going off a little bit on a tangent, but just real quickly, people talk about caloric ratios that are appropriate for active and inactive people. And for an inactive person, there is no ratio of nutrients that you can take that will be good. So people say, well, that's too many carbs for an inactive person. Well, for an inactive person, there is no ratio that's going to be better for them. Whereas for an active person, maybe I'm not talking about like Olympic level athlete, but for somebody that walks and gets out and moves their body. I forget where I was going with that now. Uh,
Well, it sounds like you're about to say that if someone's inactive, you can't. It's harder to say you need 3,000 calories a day. You're saying, in other words, physical activity affects.
yeah, we were talking about calories in, calories out.
Yeah.
But for an active person, they're going to burn through a lot more carbohydrates. I know in the China study, Tico and Campbell talked about the thermic effect of carbohydrates, that those people were able to burn through calories a lot more efficiently than people that were eating more fat in their diet. So I think that is a factor. I don't know how far that extends. I know for me, if I eat more calories, I may not notice a huge increase. I do notice that if I increase my fat intake more and
Yeah.
increase my calories, then I experience a much greater fluctuation in my weight than if I only increase my calories through carbohydrates. But even with carbohydrates, to a certain extent, I will um, increase my weight over time. And I don't think that's a bad thing. People talk about that. If there were a diet where you could eat an unlimited amount of calories and never gain weight whatsoever, without activity or something as another factor, then I don't know that I would think of that as a healthy diet that someone should follow. So I take that as a good thing. But yeah, and then there's a lot of areas that I just don't know, because I know there's a couple of girls that have a channel called Banana TV.
Yeah.
They're like 100 and maybe 115 pounds or 120. I don't. They're very trim. I don't know what's appropriate for that. Seems about right. Like a trim would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
weight. And the one girl is saying, yeah, I eat like 4,000 calories a day every day and have been for a while, and she looks very trim. So I
But
mean
she's probably doing a lot of physics.
that's more
She's
than what
probably
I
doing a lot.
so
What's that say again?
that's more than what I eat. So I don't know. I don't know how far it goes, or how much difference there is from person to person. But I know for me, if I increase my calories, carbohydrates will will cause less weight gain than fat will, but I still gain weight though.
Okay. Now it is interesting. I mean, maybe there's a difference in the sense that, let's say, competitive long distance cardio athletes actually like to have low weight because that improves their time and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And someone like yourself who wants to increase strength is not necessarily averse to increasing muscular size or even
Not at all.
and even weight. It sounds like you said you recently went to a competition and you wanted to be at a certain weight. You wanted to have, there was like an upper limit you had to reach, right? Is that right?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying like the fat mass and that kind of thing is beneficial at all. I've had conversations with people about that.
Right.
But I kind of wanted to be able to eat as much fuel to move my body as I could without going over my weight class. So my weight class is 198, which is a good weight for me because that's about what I weigh already.
Okay.
Now, if I'm a pound over that, then I get knocked up into the 220 weight class. So I
Right.
want to stay below 198, but I want
Right.
to stay towards the top of that at least. And if I lose 10 pounds or so over the next few months and am, at 190, closer to 190 or so, and then I'm going into another competition, it's not going to be a bad thing to increase my weight because then I can kind of, what they call it, bulking.
Sorry. No, you're good. You're good. Okay. All right. So yeah. So there might be. Yeah. You want to stay below a certain weight for competition, and yet at the same time you want to build muscle. You kind of want to get to the top end of that, right? You want to get as close to that edge as you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
And
And
then
then
let's talk about bloating as well. I know I just recently listened to Mark Bell, who's a pretty fairly well-known powerlifter. He was featured in the movie Bigger, Stronger, Faster as a steroid documentary.
oh, yeah.
And when he's going into a competition, he bloats up as much as he possibly can. He says that pizza is the perfect uh, weightlifting food because it bloats you up, makes you so bloated. And I don't know if it's just the nutrient transport and nutrients getting to the muscles because of the increased cations and whatever, that kind of thing, or if it's
Yeah.
actually the stretch reflex that you get because you're tighter because of the bloating. But they say there's a big effect to that. I don't know if I've experienced that so much myself, but
Well, that's interesting, and it would also be interesting to see, what are the negative consequences if they can be measured of doing that.
yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
probably, yeah, I'm sure there's some. Well, I mean, you're probably gonna be more prone to injury, muscle cramping,
Yeah.
that way. So you might throw out a muscle. I don't know.
Yeah. Um, anyway,
Primarily fruits and vegetables. You're only gonna be able to bloat so much. The day before my competition this past week, I actually ate 6,000 calories.
did you? Yeah.
It was a very, very different diet than I normally take, than I normally eat. It was very high in cooked foods, very more processed foods. And that day I didn't feel horrible, and the next day at my competition, I wouldn't say my lifts improved because of it, and I didn't have negative consequences to it, but I mean in terms of lifting, but my stomach was very upset for that day, and it took a few days before my weight came back down to normal.
Did you do that intentionally, or did you have a really strong appetite prior to the competition?
No, I did that intentionally. I wanted to see what happened. These guys talk about balking, and probably wasn't the wisest,
Uh,
decision of my life, but
no, that's cool.
I,
That's cool. You got firsthand experience now. That's
yeah,
great.
probably won't. I don't need any more experiences like that. But I
All
know
right.
Yoni Pramonin, who runs. He was a vegan strength athlete for some European country, but
Huh.
now he lives in the UK and he runs Strength Shop. And I use a lot of their materials because they're vegan materials and like their weightlifting belts and things like that. But he was saying that when he was competing as a strongman for his country, that he ate routinely ate 5 and 6,000 calories a day because the daily stresses and daily workouts that they did were just so intense, and they were 2 and 3 hours long every day of practicing all these events, so he needed that.
Wow.
On my lifestyle right now, it's apart from the weightlifting and some, walking and things that I do, it's fairly sedentary, so I probably don't need that. But
Yeah, and it sounds like you're you're satiated with 3,800 calories, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Um,
I'm probably satiated with 3,400 calories, but I don't know that there's a benefit to doing things the way that I do. But I'm kind of more, I don't know how to say it, computerized. Like I think in things of, this is the number I have to hit and this is what I do. There's no, I mean, I have a lot of variation in the foods that I choose to get there on that, but that's just how I think right now. Maybe I'll change over time. I don't know.
well, it's interesting. I mean, it seems like maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like early on you kind of explored and experimented and tried different things, and then through experience you cultivated something that felt pretty good, and now you could say it's been set in this 3,800 calorie range, but that's probably actually from a lot of trial and error.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started out very broad, and as I've gotten a little bit more narrow in kind of how I thought of things over the last few years, and I may even get more narrow at some point, or I may scrap something and say, I don't know that that was as important as I once thought it was, but for right now, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Do you have days where you get up and you don't really feel like working out, but you have to?
No, not really.
Aha,
I hate to say that because I know that a lot of people don't identify with that, but I mean, I've only been working out for a few years. I know guys that have been lifting and they're, competitive athletes for the last decade, and maybe it's more of a chore for them, but I still have goals. I still have, these, um, idealistic things that I look towards in the future that I want to achieve. So when I wake up every morning, whether it's a lifting day or not, I have those goals in mind, and I'm just so excited about it that I don't. Training is the days where I need to rest is really the days that it's hard not to train because I'm just thinking I
you
want
know
to
that
do this.
that's a great inspiration, Justin. That's awesome. Um, Now, one thing I was curious about: do you do any cardio, or do you intentionally kind of avoid cardio?
I think cardio's really good. Not necessarily for weightlifting. Usually when people come and I've started them out training and they're really sore, like you probably should do some walking, and I mean, I know guys just to help, get the blood flowing to those muscles so it improves the soreness factor.
Huh?
And I know there are guys out there. I'm trying to think of names and they're just not coming to me. But there are guys that compete in both strength sports and in endurance athletics, and they're successful in both. So it seems pretty clear to me that you can do both and not have them interfere with each other per se.
Yeah.
But it's like it's like putting together several different puzzles at the same time. It's a lot easier just to focus on one. And my primary interest is only in this one puzzle. I'm not really interested in endurance athletics. But in terms of just cardio, I like to just walk. I don't. I know like Steve Reeves, the bodybuilder I mentioned before.
Yeah.
He was into like power walking. He would just do some walking, no like running, none of the those types of things. So I'm a big fan of science fiction shows, so I put on some X Files and just walk on my treadmill and watch the X Files. So it's
That's great, man. I like that. That's great. Um, One thing you made me think of there, cardio as a rehabilitation technique. It's more as to support recovery than anything else. But what did want to ask you, I've talked to I'm thinking of Graham Campbell. He's an 80-10-10er and does some long distance cardio stuff. And he said that when he went fully raw, he noticed a significant improvement in terms of recovery time. And I'm wondering what you can say about that for you in terms of vegan diet and maybe different kinds of foods you eat. Do you notice any difference in recovery time?
well to me, recovery for an endurance athlete may be a lot more about like how they feel, or there's a lot more mental aspects I think just from listening to them talk. I don't, I'm no expert by any means on endurance athletics. But to a weightlifter, recovery means that you can lift more weight than you did the last time that you lifted. So it's a little more objective, I think, in that way. Um, and
Would you say recovery for a weightlifter also occurs while resting, right?
yeah, yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And then there's also the aspect that I don't really have a lot to compare it to since, I wasn't a strength athlete when I was a meat eater or, following an omnivorous diet.
Yeah.
But when I talk to other people, I know a lot of people on 80-10-10 will talk about I feel lighter, I don't feel as sluggish. And for sure, I think that plays a factor in how I feel when I go to train. So when I get under the squat rack or under the bar for at the beginning of a workout, I feel pretty pumped and ready to go, whereas somebody that feels sluggish may not have that enthusiasm, I guess. So maybe I'm more enthusiastic about lifting than somebody else might be, but maybe not. I don't know.
Right. Right. Okay. But yeah. Okay. So it sounds like for you at the beginning you started for ethical reasons, you said, and
Mhm.
then you got into fitness. So you've kind of health has become a major component of it. And have you also come into any of the evidence about environmental damage caused from animal production?
Yes, I'm a big fan of podcasts. So when I'm driving, I like to listen to podcasts, and I've a lot of the people I've listened to have brought up environmental factors in terms of veganism and the benefits of it. In terms of things that I'm going to get behind and stand behind, right now that's not really one of them. I believe in that, like in terms of like making good decisions for what I do to support the environment. But in terms of like getting out there and telling people, you need to think about this, you need to think about environmental factors and how it's affected, that's not something I'm really interested in right now. Whereas talking to my friends and people about, well, this is an ethical decision I've made and sharing my personal, I guess you'd say, testimony with it,
Right.
is something I'm more interested in, I guess. But I believe in the environmental aspect of it. I just am not evangelical, I guess, in that sense about it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Right. And to the animal ethics aspect of it, can you say something about, you know, you grew up not really being conscious of it, and then kind of being immersed in it, you could say you became conscious of it. So,
Yeah, it's funny. We went to there's a lot of farms local here where I live, and going to those farms and visiting the animals, I never really felt like a strong connection. It was just, it's a goat. You pet the goat. It's fine. And you take my kids, and they were more interested in it. Whereas this past year, without even thinking about it or really ever, to me, it was like before. It was like I like these animals, but I mean, I'm not. I don't want to harm them. I don't want to do anything bad to them. But I'm not like I don't feel drawn to them. I don't care about them.
yes,
Beyond that,
like a detachment. Yeah, a
comes
detachment.
these cows that like really like responded. Like they came up to me. I don't think it's because I'm like a vegan. They know somehow now, but like they were like really affectionate towards me, and like I think I felt like emotions that I don't say think I've normally felt in the past. Whereas I felt affectionate towards these animals, like farm animals and chickens and cows that I grew up around and felt nothing towards at all. So I don't know. I'm a Christian. I read the Bible and all that, but in terms of like spiritual like woo woo stuff, I don't really pay much mind to it apart from what I read in the scriptures. I'm
Right,
not
I hear you.
into
Yeah,
spirit whatever.
but I think that's a legitimate experience you're characterizing that you had with the animals, and it doesn't have to be labeled as. I mean, it's just happened. It
Yeah,
happened. So
yeah,
you felt something, and I think that's significant. Um, so, yeah, and it's interesting you raised that. There are some Christian monastic groups that are vegetarian or vegan. So
Like the Seventh-day Adventists they promote a vegetarian lifestyle, and
right,
there's others as well.
right, right. All right. Well, I think I'm missing a bunch, but let me ask you if you can think of anything that you'd like to say to folks who are maybe just considering living this way. Are there any tips you'd give them, or any recommendations for people transitioning? Any just with
Be,
that?
be objective in what you do. Keep a journal, maybe. I mean, I didn't do that, but I know when I did it, it was cold turkey. One day I decided I was doing it, and boom, I did it. And I'm like that. That's just me. That's how I am. My wife was exactly the opposite. She needed to transition. She couldn't just do this overnight. And I've seen it both ways from people. Inform yourself, arm yourself, because I think the biggest factor in people failing isn't that they necessarily have these problems. It's that they have to sit and listen to the crap that other people want to tell them about how they should be feeling, more than anything. So be objective. Stand for yourself. I know, like I just mentioned, I'm a Christian. I read the Bible. The Bible says that they fall away because they have no firm root in themselves. And I think you have to know what you believe and not necessarily let all these other people be influences. We have to be cautious about who we take influence from.
Mm.
Whether it be weightlifting or whatever, anything, I'm careful about who I allow to speak to me and tell me information, because I just realized that the average person's an idiot. And that the information that they share is not good information. It is not going to be positive, and it's not going to lift me up in any way. So, to those people that are transitioning or want to try this, my strongest advice would be take care in who it is that you're taking advice from.
Okay. On that note, and also because you're studying dietetics, to what degree do you think misinformation exists within the dietary community and within the traditional medical profession?
Well, those are two very different organizations. The American American Medical Association and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. When I listen to a doctor, I realize that they are trained in medicine, and that what they are speaking to me is from the background of someone who is trained to deal in medicine. So they're naturally going to look towards medicine as a way to alleviate my problems. I think that doctors want good things for their people. I've met many doctors from, my personal experience in dietetics, and getting to meet doctors that I do not think that the average doctor wants to do harm to anyone. They want to see their patients do well. In dietetics, I think that it's kind of the same idea. They're just going off with what they were taught. I do not agree with everything that I've been taught. I don't necessarily agree with it. I just made a video not long ago talking about the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is supportive of a vegan diet as a use for alleviating disease or treating disease. But it's not necessarily their go-to thing. They are an organization that is funded by other organizations that have conflicting interests. They're a large organization with a lot of different views and a lot of different opinions. As an organization, they kind of make some rulings and some judgments about what goes into education and what materials are used to educate students. I know in my life cycle class, we look at nutrition throughout the life cycle in different individuals, and it included vegetarians. I think I had 5 different questions on one of my finals about how a vegan or vegetarian diet was beneficial. In improved health. But then there's also that aspect where they look at the same diet of vegans and vegetarians and say, well, we need to be careful because this person may become deficient in vitamin B12. Whereas when we look at an omnivorous diet, they don't say, well, this person may be deficient in a whole host of vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
We primarily
They may have cardiovascular disease, yeah.
So it's kind of I walk out of school some days and I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I'm in dietetics. I'm thankful for the practice of dietetics. And then other days I walk out and I think, man, I don't see how we're still functioning. This is crazy. So it goes both ways. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Um, well, the last thing I want to ask you is, you how do you handle knowing what you know and then moving about in public where there is, say, either outright opposition or just a lack of knowledge? You know, you might go somewhere and you eat 10 oranges and you know, people are like, what the hell, what the hell is that all about? You know, what how do you take opportunities to kind of share the information you know and yet not put people off, if that's even an issue? Maybe you don't.
It's funny. Like I don't push like that I'm a raw vegan. I just say I'm a vegan and this is how I eat.
Yeah,
And some people think that's strange, but I make sure they understand when they talk to me about it that you don't have to eat that way if you don't want to. I mean, there are numerous ways to carry out a vegan diet. You don't have to walk around and eat 10 oranges or, 8 bananas at a time or whatever. You just whatever, and I point towards things that they can relate to, like an Asian diet or, something that's, within their mind that they can grasp hold of.
yeah.
And then my mom, she thinks it's so weird what we do. But usually my teachers, I've ate in class, and my teachers, they always want to know, like, what are you eating today? They'll come over and look at my food, and they think it's funny. Like my dietetics teachers, they're amused by it. So I guess it depends on who you're around. The people that I'm around, for the most part, are fairly positive, and they think it's funny, and I'm funny. I mean, not. I mean, I'm I'm out there. I'm
You don't take yourself too seriously.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's not this. Is there's no anxiety, there's no pressure or anger or any of that.
yeah.
Uh, but then I will say on the other side, like anybody else, I get worked up about things sometimes, and sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's legitimate. But just probably 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago or so, my wife was cleaning out a room and a barbell fell and hit her on the foot. She broke her foot.
Oh man.
I I'm associated and talk to sometimes some of those people that are really into pushing like a carnivorous diet, that you need meat in your diet. And this lady was just getting all over my wife last night on Facebook, telling her she needs to tell them she's a vegan because her body won't heal appropriately. And I had all these comments. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to tell her this. I'm going to let her know." And before I had a chance, my wife's like, she just said on the post, she said, I looked it up, and there are a few things that vegans should be mindful of, like vitamin D that we get from the sun that I may not be getting right now, that are essential in calcium, building of bones. That
Right, right.
But apart from that, there's no real evidence. So she was a little more level minded about that, whereas I was worked up and ready to like go to town on this lady. Um, Fortunately, she stopped me, but on another day I might have said that and then later thought I wish I hadn't said that. But
You know, that's a great point. You don't. It's easy when you're texting between people. You don't really always know the full story. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, Justin, you've been very patient to give me all your time. I really appreciate it, man. So
sure.
uh, it's inspiring what you're doing. I think it's great. Uh, it should help a lot of people that maybe are interested in weightlifting rather than cardio, and it's just another vegan. So thank you. Thank you.
Sure. No problem, man.
Yeah. All right. I'll look forward to more of your videos.
Okay, take it easy.
See you, man.